Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Leading the Charge. We are a couple minutes away from going on air on TV here, but we wanted to start the stream. I want to say hello to everybody. Hope you're all doing well. I've got Howard Simon coming on, another jam-packed episode. We're going to talk more about that schedule. Rookies, OTAs are coming up next weekend. The offseason starting to kind of get into full swing as mandatory minicamp looms in the horizon here. And then we'll talk about some veterans that we think need to step up. And then we're going to talk about the Tush push. Yeah, that one's getting tabled by some owners right now. They're going to making a vote on whether or not the Tush push sees a light of day in the 2025-2026 season. So we're excited. Again, questions, comments, send them our way. Howard and I are going to do our best to answer as many of them as we can get. So send them our way. Let's have a fun little day here, the week before Memorial Day. Well, hey, hello, and how are you, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome back to another edition of Leading the Charge offseason. I'm Dom Tibbetts. We have a jam-packed episode again. We're going to talk more about that schedule, what we've kind of gathered in the days after the schedule release. We've got rookie talk. We've got more vet talk. OTAs ramp up next week, too. So we're kind of getting into the meat and potatoes of the offseason as mandatory minicamp looms. We also learn where the Bills are heading back to for training camp. Spoiler alert, it's going to be a place we're all a little bit familiar with. And to help me do all of that, it's going to be our friend, Leading the Charge analyst, the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, Howard Simon. Hi there, buddy.
What do you say there, Mr. Tibbetts? How you doing?
I'm fantastic. Glad to see you here on a Monday night. We have a lot to get to, but I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. Howard, you get some color?
Well, now it's color. A few weeks ago, it was sunburn. Were you there that day on the
That's
show?
right,
when you had
yes.
to wear the hat, remember?
We had to get my man a hat here because
now,
SPF.
That'll get rid of the glare.
No, it looks great as always, Howard. Thank you for hopping on here. It has been kind of getting ramped into the OTA part of here. Obviously, after rookie minicamp, things have gone a little bit quiet here, but there's still so much to get to. Being that you have made such a mark in this community, but you've also, known about Howard picks the Bills. You see the schedule changes. What did you think about how the Bills kind of stack up here and what their schedule looks like for this upcoming season?
Do you do Dom picks the Bills for Channel 7?
I might start, but that's your thing, Howard. I might just do Dom picks, and then leave the Bills out. I don't want the Simon attorneys coming at me for copyright infringement.
Believe me, you can have it. Yeah, I don't know. It's the schedule's fine. I'm not one of those guys. Can't say I never did. I'm not one that typically I love the schedule. It's a brutal schedule. Schedule is what the schedule is. I think we've learned over the years the whole strength of schedule based on the previous season. Teams change, things change, and it's so hard. Last year we saw pieces of the schedule and thought, oh my God, that's really tough. Yep. And then teams didn't turn out to be as good as you thought they were going to be. So do I like it? Yeah. I don't think it's a particularly hard schedule. I think there's a lot to like about it, Dom. I think, as we look at it, I was a little surprised by 4 of the first 5 games being at home. Yep. Not a huge fan of so many road games in the back end, but it gives them a chance to get off to a good start. The thing I like the most, though, Look at the first 7 games, okay? The 6 weeks and then the first game out of the bye. Do you remember last year when the schedule came out? We looked at the first 6 games, and there were all those primetime games. I think 3 straight night games. Miami was in there, Houston.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we looked at it and thought the Jets, we didn't know if they were going to be good or bad with Rodgers. And we looked at it and thought, boy, 3-3 might not be the end of the world. 4-2 would be great.
Yeah.
They ended up going 4-2. Now you look at that stretch, Dom. Go ahead. Pick that stretch. I mean, the optimistic Bills fan, no question, is going to look at that and go, guys, we're running the table 7-0. Realistically, worst case scenario should be 5-2, but you could look at a real good, solid bet at 6-1 coming out of there. I love that because you can build up a little steam and stack some wins.
Yeah, I split the difference there because I think undefeated through the first, 7 games of the season, it's a little tough on the expectation. I know the schedule looks like it favors. I mean, that Baltimore game, that team is going to come in so hungry for a little bit of revenge, knowing the way things ended. So it's hard for me to think that I can just easily pencil that in for a win. I think it's going to be a great game, and I think it's a great Sunday night football game to start it off. I'll split it, though, and I'll say 6-1 after those first 7 games. I do feel confident in the fact that, you look at how the back end of the schedule and you have a couple tougher opponents like the Bucs. Yep. You go to Houston for a Thursday night football game, then the Week 17 game against Philly. It's kind of like last year, Howard. You stacked some wins early in the season. They did so when it was hard, and now they get to kind of do it when the schedule is a little bit more favorable in the beginning of the season. So I like 6-1 in those first 7 games, but I think if you're 5-2, you're good. And to your point, I said this when Matt and I did our schedule release, was we sat here, to your point, and we all were like 3-3 would be great if the Bills started that last year when we looked at that. We didn't know that the Jaguars were going to implode, and that was going to be a easy Monday night football game for the Bills. But yeah, 4-2 out of it. It makes me feel like, are the Bills due for some sort of letdown? It's hard to believe because I think the roster has gotten better. But yeah, I'm there with you. Is there a game in particular, and we can start maybe towards the beginning or anywhere you want, that kind of just jumped at you?
Yeah, the opener. For me, honestly, every year I've always been a guy who wanted the quote weakest team on paper on the home portion of the schedule. I wanted as close to a guaranteed win as possible in home opener. I'm someone who lives life looking for the easy way out, quite honestly. But honestly, Dom, I liked Baltimore. I did like the fact that the 3 toughest games on paper, I think most of us would say, are Baltimore, Kansas City, and Philly. I like the fact they're all home, but I also like the fact they're spaced apart, which is kind of nice. I'm good with Baltimore being in week 1. I get what you said. You're right. They should be angry. I mean, Mark Andrews should have this game circled on his calendar with some asterisks.
I'm sure he does.
But I like the idea of that immediate test. It's home. It's not in Baltimore because last year's game in Baltimore didn't really go so well. I like it here. I like it in the opener. I love it in prime time from the Bills' perspective because I think they'll be jacked up. The crowd's going to be going nuts. But here's the thing. Now it's a 17-game schedule, and then we hope a nice playoff run. But if you want the offseason, the biggest topic of the offseason was what? Got to fix the defense.
Right.
Well, they spent free agency dollars on it. They spent a bunch of draft picks on it. Why not have week 1, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, those receivers, bring in the Ravens. Let's see right away. Is the Bills' defense better? Because even though they won that playoff game last year, I was just looking at the box score to refresh my memory. They gave up over 400 total yards. Baltimore was 7 of 10 on third down. I mean, it's not like the defense played great. Let's see what they do right off the bat with the improvements and the changes.
Yeah, I mean, also in that game, too, remember Lamar Jackson had a couple costly turnovers that definitely turned the tide and kind of put them at a disadvantage. If that doesn't happen, considering how close it was at the end there, it's hard for me to believe that we aren't seeing an overtime in that setup, too. Howard, I had this discussion with Matt when we first released it. I love the matchup against the Eagles. I think it's going to be one of the best games of the regular season, kind of like how the Chiefs and Bills always deliver it. I think that's going to happen again. I don't know why, and maybe it's just a me thing. I don't want that week 17. I wanted that to be like swap with the Bucs game. Like, get me Philly in week 11 in the middle part of the season. Matt brought up a good point, is that if you're, have a couple guys who are a little banged up, or God forbid something happens with one of your top guys like Josh, and you need to know that you've stacked up some wins, that game against Philadelphia doesn't become nearly as important.
That's right.
I also argue that let's just see what that one is, and you don't have to worry about that if that game comes down to a potential 1 seed. But I don't know. The Eagles, for me, at week 17 feels like it should be in the middle of the season. Did that come into your mind at all?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. I mean, now to further your point that you and Matt were discussing, the upside again is also it's an NFC game. Now it factors into the 1 seed, obviously that's total wins. But if there is one of the tiebreakers in AFC seeding is your conference record. That's a non-conference game. So I don't like the fact that it's there. I mean, it's obviously a marquee matchup. I mean, I'm stunned first. It's not a night game. The game in Philly 2 years ago was a classic. I know the Bills end up losing. They got screwed, but that was a great game. I'm surprised they put it that late in the season because there is that chance, an outside chance, that at the very least, both teams could have their divisions wrapped up. If not, have a pretty solid idea of where their seating is. I don't think both teams will have nothing to play for, but it's a possibility. And that's why I thought it was kind of odd they put that so late in the season.
Yeah, I think people want to see Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and that's kind of the example I brought to Matt is you just don't know. We don't have the fortune of looking to week 17 of the season, but if those guys have their seedings locked up or a good idea where they're going to be with the division clinch, you're probably not going to see them in full action. You're not going to see them on their full display. So we'll see there. We have a lot more to get to. We're going to keep the discussion going in the break. Send your questions, comments, concerns our way over on our live stream chat. Howard and I will do our best to answer all of them. We're going to take a quick break. Stay on the stream. When we come back, we got a lot more to get to. You're watching Leading the Charge, 7 News. All right, we are into our first commercial break with no comments. Well, Leslie Campbell says, when would arrive? I don't know I don't know what would arrive. If she's wondering when Howard arrived, he arrived on time. I can confirm that. So
when would I don't know. What could possibly when would something arrive? Dom, let's play the game of what Leslie could be wondering about when it would be arriving.
My thing, Howard, do you have an Amazon package you were waiting for at any point? I certainly wasn't.
No, I already got it. Oh no, I am waiting for a package from Barnes & Noble, but it's due Wednesday.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe she just wants to know when your book is coming in. So
when rookies report from training, or when do players report for training camp? When would they arrive at training camp? I'm trying to think what else.
Maybe so. I don't know that date off the top of my head.
Somewhere in late July.
But I mean, we have voluntary OTAs coming up. So that's your question, Leslie, that is a week from tomorrow, Tuesday, the 27th. Howard, the last thing I wanted to ask just on the schedule too is we talk about the favorable matchup as well, but I'm just curious, like you look at the matchups, you get those primetime, the Chiefs, the 5 other primetime games, you get the Eagle game. Yep. Is there a game that you don't think people are talking enough about, or an opponent, a matchup that you think maybe Bills fans are kind of penciling in as a win where you're like, well, pump the brakes, hold on. This might give them a little bit of headaches.
Couple things for different reasons. Mm-hmm. I will go with the game in Atlanta, the Monday night game in Atlanta. Not that the Falcons are any great shakes, but they've tried to do some things in the offseason to improve their defense. I don't know what's going to happen at quarterback with them, but they do have very good weapons at running back, at tight end, at wide receiver. So there's skill there that you have to worry about. So I'd say that road game right before the bye week. I mean, that could be kind of tricky. The other game I would say it's Cincinnati. But the problem with that, Dom, their defense was trash last year. Like if their defense is just halfway better, Joe Burrow is still freaking really good. Joe Burrow is played last year, crazy good Joe Burrow level. But they gave up 30-something points a game. Yeah. So that if they get their defense to be just average, and Burrow is Burrow, and Higgins is back, and Chase is back, man, that is tough.
No, it's scary. And I think we were 30 minutes back before we get back on air here, Howard. But I just think of what the Bengals could have been, right, if the defense was better. Because offensive, the 3-headed monster of Burrow, Higgins, and Jamar Chase is scary to me. And I think of an easy divisional opponent, if you're kind of formulating things, could be the Bengals down the road here. So we'll talk about that more. We have a question from Lori. We're going to get to that when we come back on the TV side of things. Stick around. All right, welcome back to Leading the Charge, everybody. I'm Dom Tibbetts. Howard Simon joining us here. We came into break with no questions. Now we come back with a question. Howard, Lori wants to ask, are you guys thinking that Keon Coleman will be back to his performance level after his injury? I'll start, Howard, because I just briefly just want to mention that Keon Coleman needs to be back, and, you know, and hopefully he's taking the right steps this offseason to make sure the wrist is shored up and there's no lingering issue. But the Bills need him to be at that level that we started to see when it kind of peaked at that Seahawks game. His success this year to take that next level up, I think, is vitally important.
Yeah, you know, I know you had mentioned one of the topics we might talk about. Maybe this is it, but returning guys that need to take a big step up. He's at the top of the list. I mean, that's a high draft pick. He certainly has a quarterback who can get him the football. He's on a very good offense, and he, you know, I get it. He's not a burner, but, you know, we need to see him do a better job of winning in contested catches. You know, be open when you're not open, so to speak, become more consistent, be a little bit more physical, you know, and when the head coach and the general manager, they don't typically call guys out. I mean, maybe it wasn't as strong as the term call guys out, but they pointed out how Coleman needed to be better and some things that have to improve in his game. That's quite a notice. So I think there's definitely an onus on him because, again, I would think whatever the Bills' success, whatever they have, will still largely be based on the offense being the strength of this team. Well, they need Coleman to really step up and help that receiver room. I get the whole everybody eats and you don't need a number one. Hey, I would still shoot for a receiver who can scare the living you-know-what out of the other team. I need Coleman to just show maybe he's got that potential, just to be a better receiver, much better in year 2.
For sure. And, you know, you brought it up, and we're going to talk about some vets now that we need to see set up. And I think that kind of transitions perfectly for me because I think the identity of this team, while it needed to improve on defense, when you have Josh Allen, the offense is such an emphasis. Before this year's draft, your first 2 picks of each one were at pass threats. So you had Dalton Kincaid, and then you had Keon Coleman. So Dalton is immediately a guy who I'm thinking way ahead of the season that we need to see him have a much bigger role. Aside maybe from him, Howard, was there anybody that immediately jumped to your mind of somebody you need to see step up?
Yeah, so I'll do one on offense, one on defense. I'm with you, Dom. I think Kincaid, and I know he played hurt, you know, and so who knows. But, you know, he showed some things a couple years ago. I mean, he looked like a guy who was just taking that job away from Knox and going to run with it. And he didn't for different reasons. But I think his athletic ability and his ability to make some really circus catches and be a big weapon in this offense, I'm looking for him to look more like year 1 guy than year 2 guy. So I'm with you on that. But on that same position, I need Dawson Knox to be more of a presence. It does get to the discussion of how many footballs are there, right, to get to everybody. But, you know, he was really good pre-Kincaid draft, good enough to get a nice big contract from the Bills. And he can be a big threat in their offense. And he hasn't disappeared, Dom, but, you know, he hasn't been much of a factor. So I'd say him on offense, add to the list.
And defensively, since you mentioned another one too, I'll go on that side of the ball, Howard. For me, it's Greg Rousseau.
Yep.
I think Greg has shown the right steps, and I think he's trending in the right direction. But now with that new contract, the new 4-year extension, I think Greg is a guy you have to have him almost start to play in the same role of when you first got Von Miller, where you have to spark a little bit of fear into an offensive line. The Bills need that in their edge rushers, and I believe Greg, just with his youth, his speed, his size, is exactly what the Bills need to start establishing that presence in the defensive line. I mean, you talked about it earlier. That was the one unit that definitely had to be better. They've added pieces that are rookies. But to me, Howard, Greg is the guy that jumps in my head. I'm like, yeah, he's got to take the next step. And if I had to go anybody who's I think is trending in the right way, for me, Greg is certainly that. How about you?
Did you steal my notes? Were you looking at him on the stream?
Well, you know what it is, Howard. Smart minds think alike.
Coleman and Russo as my 2 guys. I'll add Ed Oliver with a little bit of an asterisk, because when you say step up, I think it infers that there just hasn't been enough from that guy. Like you're waiting for this blossoming of this talent. I think that's kind of where you're going with Rousseau. But we know how talented Ed is. But I'm saying it because I need consistency from him. And I know it's a difficult position. You're at defensive tackle. A lot of times you're going to face double teams. Although, again, if some of the moves they made pay off, especially some of the guys they brought in to help out on the interior of the defensive line, I think life would be easier on Ed Oliver. But I need him to be consistent. You know what? Why, Dom? Because if he's consistent, start to finish, he could be one of the top defensive tackles in the entire National Football League.
100%.
He's that talented. He's that skilled. He can be, at times we see, he's unstoppable. but he's just not playing at a level of consistency. I mean, I'm not talking like Aaron Donald, but I'm just one of the top. Can you be one of the top 5 guys in the league? I think he can. I think he's got the ability to do that, but he's got to be more consistent start to finish.
And there's also no reason why you need to put that much an Aaron Donald type responsibility on Ed, because you have other pieces around him that should help elevate his game. And obviously the way he plays, he elevates everybody else. But I would agree with you there too. We will keep this conversation going, folks. We are going back to another commercial break. We'll be back on the TV side of things momentarily, but we'll stay live on the stream, answer any of your questions. So send them our way. Howard and I will do our best to answer them. You're watching Leading the Charge on 7 News. We'll be right back. Yeah, all right. Yeah, there we go. We are in the break. Hello, everybody. Lori asked another question, going back to the receivers. Of all of our receivers, who do we see being double covered? None. Yeah. Not a single one.
Why would you? I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. There's just no guy worth double covering.
Yeah, I think you can make the argument that there's a lot of now different versatile playmakers that can help, not to confuse the defense, but definitely make them have to think about a game plan. But I mean, Diggs in the prime, that's a guy where, again, going back to your point, Howard, that's somebody who puts fear into an opposing defense, right? Right. There is nobody on this team that we're seeing right now who does that for me.
Not even close. There's guys you would never have to shade. You really wouldn't have to shade coverage to anybody. They make plays. They're okay, but there's no great game-breaking receiver that a defensive coordinator will design a plan around for his secondary to stop.
For sure. And keep the questions coming in here. We're going to come back. We had a minute left before we go back on TV. Howard, we're going to get into, I don't want to start that conversation now.
What's your
We're going to get into
a
little bit about
what's your pick for the season? Give me your record. What's the Bills' record?
Oh,
come on, get out there on a limb. Let's go. Put it on the record.
13-4.
Okay. You heard it here first.
I really think they could very much only lose 3 games. I'm accounting for that week 18 game being in the situation where they're maybe resting Josh Allen. And that's, just like we saw in the New England game last year. In my head, I'm accounting for that. But if it means something, 14-3, absolutely on the table. Impressive. What about you?
I went 13-4. You beat me. And that includes a win in week 18.
We are locked in right now, too. So we're going to come back a couple more minutes, 15 seconds to go until we are back on the TV side of things. Stay with us. Thank you. All right, welcome back to Leading the Charge, everybody. Our last block of the show. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you send more questions, comments. Howard, Simon, and I will get to them as we can. Howard, we have gone through some of the vets. I'll turn it over real quick to the rookies. I don't want to bombard you too much because I know you were in that rookie mini camp. Just off the rip, what have been just your impressions of the rookie class and how the Bills addressed it? And maybe who's a guy who you think needs to have an immediate impact, given that's a lot of responsibility for a rookie?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is the guy right. I know it's a cop-out, but the guy right at the top of the draft.
But it's a fair answer for sure.
You could say that about almost any team, but let's face it, the Bills have a glaring hole at cornerback opposite Christian Benford. And I love Trey White. I don't think he's an everyday starter at this point in his career. I like Dane Jackson too. I think Dane is a rotation guy. I don't think he's an every snap player either. So the guy who needs to really come in and make an impact and win the job in training camp and run with it is Hairston, Maxwell Hairston. I need him to be a starter. If he's not ready to go by opening, because you have Benford, you have Taron Johnson, so your other 2 cornerback spots are set. If Hairston isn't ready to go by opening day, my guess is you will see some kind of a rotation with Trey White, Dane Jackson, and Hairston if he's ready to get out on the field and get some snaps. We've seen in the Sean McDermott era, when they didn't have a clearly defined starter at one of those spots. I think back to Levi Wallace pops in my head, but there have been times where they have rotated guys inside a game. I mean, Benford used to play in that role. Yep. So I think we would see that if Hairston's not ready, but he's the guy more than anybody else they drafted, because nobody else they drafted you're looking at to come in and be a starter. This is the one guy.
And then I think of, just the fact that this defense is rotational based. And I know that's a lot more when we talk about the defensive line, but I think you're okay if that's the case where you're rotating to at least get Hairston some reps early on as a rookie. I do expect that they need to at least show that he can play. I think they were pretty quick to throw a guy like Kyer Elam out there a couple years ago. So my guess is that Hairston gets into that mix early. Howard, you had texted me before. We always do text our guest about, hey, what do you want to talk about? A little bit of show prep. Howard goes, the Tush push. And then I was like, that's right. The owners are meeting right now. The table of vote coming up on Wednesday for the Tush push, Howard. So obviously a big vote because a lot of offenses, and we saw the Bills do this very heavily last year, have a mix of the Tush push in there.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say this because the Bills have a quarterback who's 7'5" and 300 pounds. I'm fine with it. You please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not going to lie. I don't stay on top of things as much as I used to since I, don't work full time in the biz. Has there been definitive injury data? Like when we talked about, do they need to change the onside kick? Do they need to change kick returns? There were studies, there were concussions, there was actual hard data that they would look at and factor that into altering rules. Have we seen anything that says the tush push has led to more injuries, not just quarterback, the lineman? I mean, that pile's a nasty place to be. If you tell me it is a dangerous play, then I will tell you to either take it out or, tweak it. There's been talk that, well, maybe you can't go behind the center. It'd basically be a sneak. We've seen Josh do this, right? Josh will get the ball and he'll typically go left. He won't go straight. So if there's actual data, then I will listen to an argument to take it out completely or find a way to tweak it to make it safer. But right now I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I don't think there's been, at least to my knowledge, either any definitive data and articles that have been published about it. But you bring up a point, like that pile is a messy place to be. That's a lot of big bodies hitting the floor. I also just think it's weird that when we talked to, I know Sean McDermott way back at the Combine about, he was one of the guys on the rules committee that is kind of pushing towards getting rid of it. And to me, it was such an effective part of the Bills offense until it wasn't in the AFC Championship game when it really mattered. But I go back to just, the way the Eagles use it and a team like the Bills, that's an important part of the offense, and they certainly reap the benefits from it. So were you a little surprised at all that McDermott's on the rules committee and that there are so many coaches who seem to be against it?
I was a little surprised because it is a really good weapon for his team. Yeah. But the other thing too is now, again, what did they also change, Dom? Now we're pushing running backs all over the place, right? I mean, you can't carry the guy. But how often do you see the running back hit a pile and all of a sudden all of the offensive linemen join in and the tight ends and the wide receivers, and it looks like a rugby scrum, and they push the guy 10 yards before they blow the whistle. So if we're all concerned about the tush push and a massive bodies meeting and all this stuff, we got to be talking about pushing ball carriers, not quarterbacks, pushing ball carriers into piles.
Yeah, and my fear when it comes back to the Bills is I think about Josh Allen, the ultimate competitor that he is. My thought is like, okay, I've seen this guy. We've all seen him elevate on a level, right? But I go back to one of those, like, it wasn't a tush push at the goal line, but I go back to him elevating in that Cardinals game in beginning of the year and how that affected his hand. I think you almost start having more injuries if you have to start getting a little bit more creative in the way that a quarterback or somebody has to approach a short yardage situation at the goal line. To me, it just feels like it's plain and simple. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I feel like you're going to risking more injury trying to elevate and go up in the air and let hopefully gravity bring you down into the end zone. It's very interesting. We are expecting that vote to come Wednesday. So obviously a very potentially important part of the Bills offense completely out here. Matt, or I almost called you Matt. Howard,
wow.
We have a minute left here. So
pressure.
Yeah, as you get ready for OTAs, I mean, just your overall level of excitement as you now see the offseason starting to kind of ramp up as we get to mandatory minicamp, and then we're going to be officially back at St. John Fisher in August.
Yeah, I think when the schedule came out, my first thought was, why do we have to wait till, September 7th? I'm normally good with the offseason. I'm normally a guy who's like, okay, football's a grind. It's long. Let's take a break. Let's enjoy the summer. But for some reason, I don't know. I mean, they were better than I thought last year, Dom. And I think they have done a really good job on paper addressing their biggest flaws, their biggest needs. That schedule came out. And my first thought was, let's get to September 7th. I'm ready now.
All right. We got to go there. Howard Simon, thank you so much. I'm Dom Tibbetts. We'll see you next time. Howard, thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Anytime, Dom. Thank you, Julia.
As always, thank you, Howard, everybody. Thank Howard in the chat. Go give him some love. The best in the biz. So we appreciate you, sir.
Take care.
All right, to everybody who tuned in, thank you so much. We'll be back again, I believe. I'm going to look at my producer, Julie. I believe we do have a Memorial Day show, as far as I know. So we'll see you back here Monday night, Memorial Day. If you want to cool down after the barbecues and the family get-together, come hop on. We'll talk. Got something cool in the works. So we'll see you all then. I'm Dom Tibbetts. Bye, everybody.